Welcome to Season 2 of the Robertson and Easterling podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. I'm Matt Easterling.
And I'm Craig Robertson. Matt and I are board-certified family law specialists who have put together one of the brightest group of attorneys in Mississippi, specializing in divorce and other family conflict.
In this season of the podcast, you'll hear from more real people discussing the most difficult season of their lives. We will also introduce you to more of our network of professionals who help hurting people in the healing process.
So now, once again, sit back, relax, take a deep breath. Everything is going to be okay. You found us, and what you're about to hear is going to help. One of the favorite things we get to do on the podcast is hear from former clients, and there's not any client more dear to me than my friend Marek. Marek has an amazing story, really, that actually started in Eastern Europe. And Marek, thank you for being with us today. I'm really honored that you would share your story with our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me, Craig. I would just say it's not really Eastern Europe, but Central Europe.
And we start with the geography lesson.
That's okay, because so Marek grew up in what was then known as Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic. I've actually been there. Spent a little time in Prague while backpacking through Europe many years ago. But tell our listeners, mostly Mississippians listening to this, about your childhood, about what it's like growing up in the Czech Republic.
Yeah, so I wish to say, it was great. It was just fairy tale, which many times it could be. But no, I was born into a communist Czechoslovakia, which of course was kind of a weird times because, communism is pretty challenging in so many different levels. But I was pretty small when all that changed. It changed kind of about when I was 9 years old. But, I grew up in a small family, have one sister. My parents were working, people, kind of middle-class family. Essentially, my parents divorced, so I mostly kind of lived with my mom. But yeah, it was what I thought at the time, kind of a typical childhood in a small country. And I thought I had a somewhat normal childhood.
How old were you when your parents were divorced?
I was around 12 years old. Mm-hmm.
How would you characterize your parents? I mean, because the country changed and transitioned from communism while you were a boy. Mm-hmm. How did the communist regime impact your parents and their outlook on life?
Mm-hmm. Well, to my understanding, none of my family were fans of communism. And, if you look at the history of the country, it has a very rich history. And, unfortunately, the whole communism, which lasted about 40 years, that, impacted really everybody. And I think with the whole idea of communism comes a lot of fear. So I think that now looking backwards and having some conversation, especially with my mom, about like our family and my grandparents who were impacted the most because they literally spent most of their lives living in that regime. I know there was fear, there were fear of talking about certain things. There were fear of persecution because, the regime really persecuted people who were not really wanting to, obey the rules or go with the flow. So, what I understand or now think of, it was just kind of a lot of fear, some fear aspects on their lives.
So what do kids do growing up in the Czech Republic?
Well, I think it's similar. You just play games and try to make friends. And, back then, of course, that was the era when internet was not around. So that was just kind of, I remember playing like Tetris. That was probably the only game that I ever played. But yeah, we just played outside. It was a lot of, outdoors, being outdoors, playing games, just simple. Comparing to today's age, I think it was much simpler and a little bit freer because, parents just let the kids go outside and you don't necessarily know where they are. You just kind of, as long as you come home at a certain time, you were fine, which I think today wouldn't really work anymore.
So, Mark, what actually brought you to the United States?
Yeah, so one of the things I did growing up, which kind of was a big outlet for me, I got into dancing, which was, very unusual, especially for a guy. But I just grew up. That was, when you ask people what they did, what kind of sports, I did some other sports, but I kind of always ended up doing different kind of dancing. So I grew up folk dancing at first, well, gymnastics, but then folk dancing, which is this really cool, regional, I guess, style of dance over there. And then I switched into ballroom dancing. So I competed ballroom dancing.
And how old as a teenager, you were doing these things?
Yeah, well, even prior to teenager, like I started really, I don't know, maybe 6, 7 years old with the folk dancing. And then I was maybe 9 or 10 when I switched into the ballroom dancing. And so my life actually was quite unusual, just spend most of the time, doing dance. And essentially I went to pursue it as a career, actually kind of at the age of 15, which was somewhat a little bit late, but I was trying to decide, what to do, where to go, what to study, and found there is this school called Dance Conservatory in Prague, which is the capital. And yeah, they accepted me to basically pursue ballet and modern dance, which I really haven't done until that point. So that's what I did, and that's what essentially brought me to Mississippi.
And how old were you when you moved to Prague?
I was 15 years old. Yeah.
And how long did you live in Prague pursuing ballet?
5 years. Yeah.
And then that's when you came to the States?
And right after I finished the school, I came to the United States. That's right.
So you've been out of your parents' home since you were 15 years old?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And so what attracted you to Mississippi specifically?
Yeah, so it's, another kind of a really cool, unique story. I became a believer shortly before. So
shortly before you moved to the U.S. or to Prague?
Before I moved to the States, yeah. I was basically doing all kinds of projects mostly in Germany, but I got to meet some, Christian dance companies and Christian dances, and I was just privileged to basically do different projects in Europe with them, still while I was at school. And through one person to another, one connection to another, I found out about Ballet Magnificat, which is a local professional Christian dance company, and one of the first one ever created, actually. And so I found out about Ballet Magnificat. And since I was a child, I always wanted to come to the States. I was always intrigued, mostly watching, American movies about this country. And, I've known Europe up until that point pretty well. So I was like, well, let's just try something else, and of course I was very, very young. And so I was like, hey, America, and there's an opportunity. So I decided to jump on it and came here.
So, Marek, you're from a relatively small village, and at 15, you traveled by yourself to the capital city of the Czech Republic, which is Prague, and you study there for 5 years. And from that point, you became a new believer, and you were interested in pursuing your dance career professionally. And you had watched good old American movies growing up. And were these movies in English, or were they in Czech and then subtitled, or both?
Mostly they were actually changed, dubbed into a Czech language. They are actually really known. They always win prizes for dubbing the foreign films into the language. So most of them were really dubbed into the Czech language.
What was your favorite American movie growing up?
Well, to be clear, it really wasn't necessarily movies. It was like TV series, okay? So I remember, back when I was a child, they played like the series called Dallas.
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised you didn't end up in Texas, but you married a Texan.
I
but
did essentially marry
we're
a
going to talk
Texan.
about that soon.
But yeah, so that was one of the series. But, as I was a teenager, one of the, series that were really, really popular and hooked up the whole country, really, I thought was like, series like Beverly Hills 90210 and
Oh, yeah.
Melrose Place, and just kind of this soap, teenage operas kind of a thing. So
Sure. So, I mean, what an adventurer, though. As a 15-year-old kid, your parents get a divorce when you're 12. 3 years later, you move to the capital city by yourself. And then 5 years later, you board an airplane to the United States. Had you visited Ballet Mag before you came?
no, I did not. They didn't really know that much about me. I didn't know really that much about them either. So that was just kind of, big step into an unknown.
So when you landed here in Mississippi, did you speak English fluently or?
Some people would question whether or not he speaks English fluently now.
He speaks better
thanks,
English than I
Greg.
do.
He speaks outstanding English. I'm not speaking of myself.
I did speak English, but I remember, it certainly wasn't what it is today. But I was taught British English, so I thought that, I could speak it. But of course, suddenly you come to a new country, and of course, Mississippi English has really pretty much nothing to do with British English.
That's a very fair statement.
And so I remember I just could not understand at first pretty much anybody, from around here. It was the whole dialect, the whole twisting words. And yeah, I had issues, let's put it that way, for a while.
That had to be a lonely experience for a young man.
Little bit. I had, there was a Czech friend who actually, there's another Czech dancer who is still with Ballet Magnificat. So I remember, at the beginnings, I was, speaking with him quite a bit. And if we could, we would speak the Czech language together. But, it just took a little time to adjust and, and it got better, of course, as time went on.
So what was life like as a professional ballet dancer, as a 20, 21, 22-year-old young man from the Czech Republic?
Yeah, it was great. I, with the dancing and, the companies that I've been part of, they travel a lot, they tour a lot. And I always loved that, traveling around, going to new places, meeting new people. So it was really exciting. It was just something I've pursued, growing up. And, I really enjoy just doing it during that season of my life.
And you met your wife.
And I met my wife through that. That's right.
Talk about that. Talk about how that came to be.
Yeah. Well, we met at the ballet company. We became pretty quickly really good friends. And I still talk about that, at first. And I still believe we had a really beautiful story. We had so much in common. And yeah, we were just dancing together. We were really close friends for quite some time. And then the friendship kind of evolved into more than just friendship. And essentially we got married and started a life together.
Is your wife, or is she originally from the United States? Or
Yeah, she's
She's from Texas.
She was from Texas, that's right.
So all those years of Dallas prepared you for what was going to be that season of your life.
I'm not sure about that, but
how long did the two of you date before you got married?
Well, that's a tricky question because we were, really close friends for, quite some time. The actual dating, it was a little complicated because I was here and then I kind of went back to Europe and kind of mostly our dating kind of was happening while I was gone. So, I would say, oh gosh, I don't remember, but it was probably 3/4 of a year, something like that, the actual dating.
And when did you finally hang up your ballet shoes, if that's a thing that you say? I don't know if that's a thing that you say or not.
I'm afraid that I thought I hang them up several times, but it's just a weird thing about dancing. Once you're a dancer, you're always a dancer. So believe it or not, I just started actually to go back to the studio and take a class here and there. So I haven't completely hang them up, even though I thought I've done that several times, but it somehow still has this magic to suck me back in. And so I still go in occasionally. And of course, not every day, just, once a week or every other week.
Monica, are you announcing a comeback on the Robertson Easterling podcast today?
Well, I don't think it's a comeback. It's just kind of keeping myself in shape somewhat.
So talk about your life. So you're I'm just brave is the word that comes to my mind. Brave. And you go to the capital city, you pursue your dancing, you become a believer, you come to the United States. After years of training, watching Dallas and Beverly Hills 90210, you sweet talk a good Texan into becoming your wife, and talk about your life together.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been married 15 years. And again, I think that, like I said already, I thought we just had a great story. We had so much in common. I really liked her very much at the time. And we just got married. We actually got married and kind of retired from touring and dancing professionally right away. So we both started kind of new careers and just tried to do other things than just dance. We just kind of started a simple, new life together. Both of us, like I said, in my case, my family wasn't necessarily very functioning. It was somewhat dysfunctional family, as many families unfortunately are these days. And hers was too, except that it really wasn't talked about that much or seen that much. So, I kind of saw very early on in our marriage that, there's not really much examples to look backwards in our own, families of origin to kind of follow any of the possibly, good routines or whatever. So I was like, well, early on, I was very firm that, we are our new, you and I are our new family. We need to start things together kind of on our own, and we need to learn, probably from other places, not just our families of origin, how to make this work. And I was quite intentional about it, and I think again for a long time, I think we just were doing quite well. Probably the first 10 years of marriage were really, I thought, really, really good.
Hey, this is Kaylin Dunnels. I'm an associate attorney here at Robertson & Easterling. Look, visiting with our attorneys does not mean you're going to get a divorce. It simply means you are choosing to arm yourself with information about how the Mississippi legal system works. After a meeting with me or one of our other attorneys, you'll feel like the weight of the world has been lifted from your shoulders, and you'll have a plan for the next steps you need to take. Remember, the fact we even spoke is totally confidential. Click on the link on our website or just call the office. We would love to get to know you better. Until then, take care and enjoy the second half of our show.
So what changed after the first 10 years?
Well, several things has kind of started to change. I think that part of every human life is change. We all change.
That's well said.
And I was always a firm believer in growth and personal growth, and sometimes maybe a little over the top with that. And I thought everybody's like that. I honestly was I just thought everybody wanted to grow and better themselves somehow. And but I realized that's not the case because my ex-wife now, even though she was somewhat attracted to it, she just wasn't really much into, growing as a person. And I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong. It just kind of started to drift. Another probably major dilemma was that I realized, again, because of the dysfunction of both of our families, and of course living here, her parents actually lived in town at the time. So we were so much kind of close to her family. And like I initially thought, was hoping for, that we starting our own family. That didn't necessarily happen. In my head it did, but in reality it didn't, because as I've learned many years later on my own journey, there's the idea of leave and cleave. When you get married, you kind of leave your family, you start your own, and it, again, unfortunately didn't necessarily happen in our case. So, my ex-wife was constantly kind of prioritizing her parents, and we were so much part of their life and their mess in a way that there was always, kind of drama dealing with, her family of origin. And essentially it just was so much that we didn't really necessarily have time to deal with our own things. So
It's almost what I'm hearing you say is almost your marriage and your family did not develop its own identity, and your family of origin, while dysfunctional, was an ocean away.
That's right.
But yet hers was down
Right
the street.
here. That's right.
And there was you didn't use the word enmeshment, but that's something that we hear a lot about in our practice is just that, what you spoke so beautifully, was the inability or unwillingness to leave mom and dad and one's family of origin, and then create this new thing, this new family, this new relationship. And it sounds like that's what sidetracked you to a large degree.
That's very true. And yes, the enmeshment is definitely the right word for it. Yeah.
So what was the turning point? When did things fall apart?
Well, it really started with her parents getting sick. Her father was diagnosed with cancer years and years ago, and it was kind of a long process. And, one of the, her response was, I want to be with Dad. I want to do as much as I can with Dad while he's here. And at the time, they actually relocated from here to Texas. So she was like, I really want to be with Dad. And of course, I understood that to an extent. I was like, I can imagine what it's like to have, a parent who is, dying of a cancer. But it just became, that was just the life. She kind of relocated to Texas and took care of Dad and was there as much as possible, pretty much most of the time. And we would just occasionally meet. And of course, with that and marriage, that doesn't necessarily really work that well when your spouse is gone. I mean, we would talk on the phone, but that's not, a relationship, really. So that's kind of what it initiated. I realized, we starting to really disconnect on all levels, not just emotionally, but so that was just the first sign. And I mean, it lasted for a long time, probably almost a year. And then, things kind of got better, and we, got back together, and, father died, and we were together again. And I thought we're slowly kind of getting back to where we were. But there were, she was kind of processing the grief, and not sure if she really knew how to grieve all that. But then, fast forward another year or two, her mom had a stroke, and the whole scenario kind of started to repeat again. I want to be with Mom. I need to take care of Mom. And again, she decided to leave to Texas again, and it was very similar, but actually really a little bit worser, because it just was the disconnect was on much more deeper level.
Was there ever discussion about the two of you relocating to Texas?
No, it really wasn't. Our life, we did in the midst of actually, for a long time, we actually worked together. We started a business, and so our business actually is in New Orleans mostly. So we, our life was kind of between Mississippi and Louisiana, and suddenly, we added the Texas leg to it. So it just started to get a little complicated. But yeah, it just, the second time with her mom getting sick, it was just very clear, of course, me or the marriage wasn't necessarily the priority. It was, unfortunately, the parents, and that just really made the disconnect much deeper.
You know, Monik, one of the things that you said is that human life is change. I mean, if we're not growing and changing, then we're dying. And your wife had some very altruistic motivation. I mean, she was caring for her ailing parents. And so it's almost like the motivation was pure, but what the impact was a devastation on the relationship that you guys and the family that you guys had created together.
Yeah.
Well, and even if both, people are growing, you can be growing in different directions.
That's right.
And that creates a real distance that, unless there is great collaboration and intentional, behavior, you're not going to be able to bridge that gap.
And you, the two of you did not have children together. So I guess then, how did that impact, you think, what ultimately created the end of your marriage? Because it sounds like that if you guys might have chosen to have children, then the dynamic might have been different. Or what do you think?
Well, certainly I think it would, but I think really the way it impacted the end of the marriage, it made things easier.
Well, and there's no question about that,
right,
because even though you guys had a lot of history together, you had really worked together the whole time you had even known each other, working as a professional dancer and then working as an artist and jewelry maker together. But yet, when it came to finally there being a decision to part ways, then certainly not having children allows people to do that fully. Talk about divorce. Talk about when that became a topic of discussion between you and your now former wife.
Well, it kind of was very sudden, really. Again, we were experiencing the whole disconnection on many, many levels, as I mentioned, and it kind of really worsened. It just became worse and worse. And I was, as most men are, we want to fix things. We want to figure out what's going on. So I was, I just started to ask questions like, hey, we need to really talk. Most of our conversations were over the phone, really. And so we agreed that, I would make a trip to Texas to visit them, and I haven't really seen her now for probably a month or month and a half at that point, and when I showed up there, and everything was different. It was just I was like, oh my goodness, like I could just tell just something is off, and she looked different, she talked different, and so I was like, this is just odd. To say the least, and it was just in a way really bizarre visit. I was supposed to stay there for almost a week, but after a couple of days, I was like, this is just strange. The best thing for me would be just to go back to what I was doing, and so yeah, it was just a very odd visit. We didn't really talk that much. The most attention was again on the mom, and she was at the hospital at the time, and then she actually wrote me a letter at the time, and how unhappy she is, and how there's just kind of finger pointing kind of a thing, and that that we just probably need to take more time to be away from each other. It was like, well, that we've had quite a bit of that. But after, then she's like, I need time to think. And I was like, okay, you had plenty of time, I thought. But anyway, I of course respected that. So we haven't talked for like 3 weeks, not even on the phone. And then she just called me and says, I think I want a divorce, and that's it.
Describe the feeling that you felt in that immediate moment when those words were spoken out loud.
Well, it's just a shock. It's just, you feel heartbroken. You feel I mean, I was just kind of shocked. I knew things are not right. I even actually probably thought that could be a possibility, but just the way it came around was just quite shocking. And, you feel heartbroken after all those years. So
at that moment, I mean, after you get over the initial shock of hearing that, did you start to realize that you yourself were in that place too, and you were kind of ready to move on, or was this something that you felt like you were going to try to hold on to?
Well, I was in a place where I always thought that it takes obviously two to tango, and there's always two sides of the stories, of course. But I thought that to make some kind of a major change in life like that, you just don't do that kind of overnight. And that's what it felt like. So I was like, listen, we need to try to seek some help. We've had I had resources to reach out to the, right people at the time that could potentially help us. And I've tried that on my part, on my end, but she was just unwilling to do that. So as one of our dear friends told me, was like, you can beat your head against the wall and nothing's going to change unless the other partner is wanting to do something about it. So, it was just kind of, I felt like I wanted to try to work on it, give it a chance to just repair whatever has been broken, but there wasn't really opportunity. It was just like, no, this is what I want. I made up my mind. I want to move on. And, so.
And you decided to let her go?
Yeah, essentially. I was like, well, I'm not going to be pushing or pursuing somebody who is just, unwilling.
Who doesn't want to be pursued, right?
Who doesn't want to be pursued, and it got more, complicated later on. I mean, it took me a wise counsel to really figure out, some of the details that were going on in the background, which, were I was quite unaware of at the time. So it was just a whole, totally, obviously, a new experience for me.
But I think it says a lot about you, though, because what we experience is so many people hold on to that thing which has died, or that dream which did not materialize, almost to their detriment, because you processed the loss and you made the decision that if that's what she wanted, then you would work through the process and let that happen. And you guys did, in fact, divorce, and probably didn't feel like it for you, but for what Matt and I do on a daily basis, it was a relatively simple contract negotiation that you guys worked through. I'm really interested in life after divorce. So we've talked a lot about your story and just the adventurous spirit and the artisan spirit that brought you to the U.S. and you became a dancer and you met your wife and you had this life together and you drifted apart and you allowed the divorce to happen. So what's life like now?
Well, I like to say, and a lot of my friends heard me say, I'm happily single again or happily divorced. I don't know. It wasn't, obviously I had to come to that place to be able to say that, because obviously it was difficult for quite some time. But then miraculously, things just changed in my mind. Like I just started to look at it differently, I guess. And, I was like, well, it is what it is. Reality is what it is. And I actually embraced it, I thought, quite well. And I just was like, it's okay. I can be single for a while now again. And it's been a, really great journey. I feel like I've been, and other people told me who know me that, this is pretty exciting new season in my life. I feel a bit happier, I guess, than when than over the last few years.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. I know that one of the big struggles that we see every day are people that are grieving the loss of their marriage, and things are so dark, it's very difficult for them to imagine hardly anything positive, going forward in the future. And so I think that it's so helpful for people to hear somebody that's walked through that, talk about finding happiness once they get through their divorce.
What do you think is the most important thing that you did to come to a place where you're at peace and that you're happy and you're excited about today and tomorrow?
Well, I would say really it's the community that I'm part of. I've been really blessed to be part of some great community here in town, and I have some great kind of a support system around me that really, people walked with me during the bad and the good times. So I would say that is probably what really got me to a place where I am today, is just being able to rely to some really close, intimate friendships with other people.
That is just beautifully said, because we are relational beings, and that really is the core of who we are as individuals, is the manner in which we relate and are in community. Talk a little bit about your work, because I know that people have been listening and they know you're an artist and jewelry maker. Tell our listeners a little bit about your jewelry and the work you do and where someone could find it.
Yeah, so I am kind of this split of a person, really. I'm an artist. I've been an artist all my life, but I also love business. And it's kind of a rare combination. You don't necessarily always put the two and two together, but somehow that's just the case in me. We started, the jewelry business 15 years ago, and that's kind of evolved from a little small jewelry business selling at Belhaven Market here in Jackson 15 years ago into, it's not a big business by no means, but it evolved into a very creative, artistic kind of a jewelry line that I mostly produce and make myself. And most of the time these days still sell in New Orleans at the art market, at the Palace Market Frenchman on Frenchman Street in New Orleans. So yeah, that's kind of what I do most of the time, but also, do some business, personal coaching on the side as well.
And talk a little bit about the business coaching that you do, kind of your mindset, because you're right. You talked about the intersection of art and business, and oftentimes they are very mutually exclusive. You either have a artistically minded person or a business minded person. It's very rare that you see those things blended.
And again, out of that passion for pursuing the art as a career, evolved what, this whole business coaching or personal coaching. Several years ago, I got certified through a John Maxwell team to basically become a life business coach, trainer. And I've always respected John C. Maxwell for many years. He's, of course, author of many, many books on leadership and personal growth. And this kind of gave me an opportunity to use his wisdom and his materials to provide to other people. So, when I describe the coaching, I like to bring the business side of things to the artists or art people, and vice versa. I want to bring the art and creativity to the business people, because like you said, the two kind of intersect quite a bit.
I'd be interested to know, did you see any changes in your artistic expression as you went through your divorce and maybe kind of emerged from the ashes of that relationship?
That's a good question. I didn't think about that, but now that I think about it, yes, sure. I mean, there's the jewelry business, I obviously create, designs, the earrings, necklaces, bracelets, rings, etc. And a lot of the designs I've been, even though they are one of a kind, the image or the design is somewhat repetitive. I've been making certain things kind of over and over again with some changes. But yes, I did create some new designs since the divorce. And I do think they do reflect kind of maybe just being in a little different place. And, as an artist, I'm more of an abstract artist. So sometimes, I have to kind of add a little story to what certain piece might mean. But yeah, I do think that it changed a little bit on the newer designs for sure.
So if somebody wanted to look at some of your jewelry or to buy anything outside of going to Frenchman Street in New Orleans, which I'm always looking for a reason to go to New Orleans, where could we find it?
Well, I am pretty active on social media, so I'm putting the newest pictures on Facebook and Instagram under DCZ Designs. I also have a website, dczdesigns.com.
Okay. And what about the coaching?
The coaching, I have a website as well. It's called dczcoaching.com.
Monik, you're inspirational, man. Just the bravery, the adventurous spirit, the commitment to growth, the commitment to your art, really inspirational. And I've just really enjoyed sitting with you today. And I'm very grateful that you agreed to share your story so beautifully, so vulnerably. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to the Robertson and Easterling podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
If you need our help, we would love to hear from you. You can request a consultation from our website 24 hours a day, and it takes less than 5 minutes. If you like our show, subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, or your favorite podcast player. We want you to be one of the first to know when our next episode drops.
Have a great rest of your day, and remember, there's nothing wrong with arming yourself with information. On behalf of the Robertson and Easterling family, thanks for spending time with us. This podcast is not a substitute for an attorney. All information is provided as a general reference and public service. Listening to this podcast does not create a professional relationship with Robertson and Easterling or any of its attorneys or guests. This podcast may be considered advertising under applicable rules, and free background information is available upon request. For more information, please visit our website, www.robertson.ms.